So in today's video, I'm going to show you a really quick way of turning your travel photos into these kind of rough, loose, urban watercolor sketches in Procreate. As usual, I'll list the brushes I'm using in the description. And of course, to start, the first thing we need is some kind of photo. And I just got back from my trip to Sri Lanka, and I think this is my favorite one. And the first thing we need to do is make a sort of rough ink outline of all the main elements. So to do that, I've got the photo here placed as the very top layer. I'll make a new layer above it, and I'll lower the transparency of the photo just so I can barely see it. And then on the blank layer above, I'm going to use the annoying pen brush to kind of rough out all the major details. And there's definitely a lot of ways to do this, and they'll all look nice. But what I like to do is first kind of choose an element and basically draw the silhouette of it with one stroke. And then I'll continue that stroke and try to do as many of the interior details as I can without lifting the brush. Next, I like to turn off the photo and then use the eraser to kind of cut back the sketch around the edges. And that's because I don't want to be constrained to like a square or a rectangle. I like the border of this to be a little bit more freeform. And with the outline finished, we can move on and actually add the watercolor. And that's going to be on a blank layer, of course below our lines and also below the paper texture. And I'm just going to go in there with the smooth dry round brush and just roughly block out all the background colors for all the main elements. Now I don't want to overlap the different colors too much, so it's totally fine if there's kind of a white gap between them. For the cyclists, I think I'll just totally ignore them for now and just paint them in as details later on. And then for the bricks and the steps, this is a little bit of a challenge because it's hard to separate kind of the material from the texture. So I think I'll just do a rough sort of background wash and then a bunch of perpendicular strokes just to enhance the sort of bricking and the kind of panels here. This scene also has a lot of really important shadows, but at this stage, I'm going to ignore the shading and just try to see this whole scene kind of flat. And the tuk-tuk has quite a bit going on, so I'll spend a little bit more time on this. And once the main sort of background washes and textures are finished, we can move on and do the shading. And that's going to be on a separate layer above everything so far. I'll set the transparency to multiply. And I like my shadows to be a sort of blue tone like this, so I'll choose a dark blue. Again, I'll continue with the smooth dry round, and I'll just roughly block out all the sort of defining shadows in the scene. And I think this covers the darkest shadows pretty good, but the effect is definitely too dark. So I'm going to adjust that just by kind of changing the transparency. There we go. After that, I'll make another shadow layer, set to multiply as well. And I'll do another pass of these sort of secondary kind of minor shadows, and then I'll refine the transparency of that as well. And once the shadows are finished, we can finally move on and do the details. In this case, it's pretty much just the cyclists. So I'll make another blank layer, and I'll roughly kind of fill those in using the Shoto brush. And there we go. At this point, the illustration could be finished, but there's a couple more kind of cleanup stuff and finishing touches that'll really improve this. The first thing I like to do is sort of remove some of the excess lines. And for example, I'll make sure the line layer is selected. I'll use the eraser brush. And for me personally, I like to erase the line details from the shadow areas, but you can do this however you want. Basically, just go around and experiment with what it looks like if you remove the lines from certain areas, and you might be surprised at how interesting it looks. The next kind of improvement here is going to vary quite a bit from scene to scene, but in some scenes, you're going to have areas where there are kind of like big elements that are the same color. So in this case, I think this green looks a little bit too consistent. And so what I'm going to do to fix that is use the Freehand selection tool, and I'll just make a random selection through that color. I'll circle back. I'll feather it out quite a bit. Hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'll just mess with it a bit and try to introduce a secondary color. And I'll repeat this trick in a few other areas as well. Now with digital watercolor, one of the problems you can run into is basically the colors being too consistent. So by shifting the colors kind of randomly in some areas, it can make it look much more natural. And finally here for the last trick, I'm just gonna go in there with the water blender and use it to blur out any of the weird sort of digital looking overlapping strokes. And then also, just for my own style, I'm gonna soften the shadows as well. I think for me, I really like to see shadows with less detail. And just like that, this loose watercolor sketch is finished. And here's the final result, just printed out on my Canon Pixma. And for me, I was thinking about making like a set of 3 of these, just from my photos from my recent trip. And then I would frame them up in a single frame, but with 3 separate pockets. But that's gonna take some time, and eventually when I do it, I'll put some pictures of that on my Instagram. And that pretty much wraps it up. If you made it to the end, let me know in the comments. If you think I've earned it, give this video a like. And here are 2 more watercolor tutorials I think you'll love to watch next.